Okay. So the title of my paper is Rame-Hind and Blessed Blasphemies, Ram as a Muse of Urdu Poetry in India. So first, I would like to introduce the fact that Ram has been a long-standing muse of Urdu poetry. As Muhammad Iqbal would call him Imam-e-Hind, Ram and his legend has bewitched the Shayars, Dastan Gois, Marsiya Gois, Mapela singers, so many through the ages. As we know that Soz and Marsiya Goi tradition are very heavily localized within the Awadhi region. So especially the poetry that have been brewed in the Awadhi area have always hailed him as a local hero and a very domestic persona per se. Also, the emergence of Sufism and Bhaktism in the Indian backdrop have facilitated the figures of Ram and Krishna as spiritual symbols embodying the psyche and the spirit of the movements. As we're already aware of Akbar's Maktab Khana and the translations of Ramayana into Arabic and Persian during the Mughal period by Abul Fazl and Badayuni, etc. So I first want to establish why did I choose Urdu poetry instead of Arabic and Persian poetry, because I personally feel that Urdu poetry actually embodies the rikta that I am trying to establish by my paper, and also the aim of rikta that the Vaishnavite figures had in our country during the Sufism and Bhaktism movements. As Muhammad Farooqi would argue that Urdu as a language actually is a product of the Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. Even John Coatsworth argues that Urdu was a product of a courtly and elite settings, making it a very perfect language for writing flowery poetry. And if you look at the language, it is a perfect assimilation of the Khari Boli, and while it uses Nashtalik writing system. For further, I would substantiating my argument that it is a very inclusive language per se. Smith and Hutchinson in their researches actually noted how ordinary Muslims and Hindus alike spoke the same language in the United Provinces in the 19th century, namely Hindustani, whether called Hindi, Urdu, or one of the regional dialects such as Braj or Awadhi. Now, I would like to refer to this part in my article that recently, if you look at the news media, etc., there is a sort of exceptionalization of Ram in Urdu poetry. There are various articles which are specifically dedicated to glorify Urdu writers writing about Ram in the Urdu language. But I would argue that there is nothing exceptional or sensational per se. I agree that it has some sort of a sensational value at this moment per se due to the very communal environment of our country. But there was nothing exceptional about it from the start. That is why I would try to differentiate between the pre-independence, during independence, and post-independence writings of Ram in Urdu literature. Now, upper class educated communities were always very well versed in Urdu and Farsi due to the Mughal and then the English colonial rules. And before the independence movement started, Ram just naturally existed in Urdu literature. Ram was a very natural part of Urdu literature. But during independence movement, suddenly this local figure of a very beloved son and a beloved brother suddenly started gaining this national icon value. And as we move towards the communal Hindutva or the newly established Hindu ideas of Hindu Rashtra, Ram suddenly transmutated himself into an icon of national sentiments and nationalistic sentiments per se. As Rakshananda Jalil in her book, But You Don't Look Like a Muslim, writes about her experience that how while growing up in Lucknow, she used to automatically watch Ramlila tableau in Lucknow, where Hindustani verse interspersed, as she says, with flowery Urdu verses. There was nothing separate about it. There was nothing there was no containment. Something happened very naturally. The publisher noted how while growing up, he saw his grandfather reading out Ramayana in Urdu because he was not very well versed in Hindi. He could not read Hindi at all. And I think that reflects how the upper caste, upper class Indian, North Indian people were always more well versed in Urdu. Not always, maybe, but mostly well versed in Urdu. According to a comprehensive study of Ram Kathan in Urdu by the late Ali Javed Zaidi, there are over 300 such versions and several written in the style of Marsiya Goi, popularized by Anis and Dabir. Ajay Malviya, in his book Urdu Mein Hindu Dharam, catalogues such 103 Ramayana translations in Urdu. Now, scholar Shahid argues that Urdu acted as the primary language for a substantial portion of the educated community, and that is why there have been several translations of Valmiki's Ramayana and Tulsidas's Ramcharitmanas. One of the reasons these translations kept on happening is because most of the people could not read the Hariboli or Sanskrit or Brajabhasha or Bhaka for that matter. Even Munawar or Khushtar, both of them who were Urdu literates and they had extensively written about Ram, argued that if it was not for writing or translating religious texts into Urdu or the teachings of Ramayana into Urdu, maybe these religious texts would become extremely difficult to preserve because Urdu as the lingua franca at that point of time helped preserving these religious scriptures into the national psyche. Some gazettes or magazines which were dedicated and focused on Hinduism, like Sanatan Dharm, Pracharak, Tej, Arya Veer, Veer India, Arya Gazette, etc., they would continue writing in Urdu as some late as 1940s. Bhajans were composed in Urdu. Shahid also goes on to argue that maybe these Urdu writings of Ramayana, either translation or original poetic proliferation of Ram in Urdu literature, had an element of public performance in it, mushaira, etc. So Ram in pre-independence Urdu literature, if you look at the pre-independence Urdu literature, either in translation or in original poetic forms, there is a very important symbiosis of Hindu and Islamic religious motifs. Hindu and Islamic religious characters and symbols would coexist in the same pages without any conflict whatsoever. And Ram acted as an embodiment of Maryada, Purushottam, honor, righteousness, loyal, and mostly as a story of filial piety and family tragedy. As Brij Narayan Chakbast wrote in one of his sources, that rukhsat hua wo baap se lekar khuda ka naam, rahe wafa ki manzile awal hui tamam. मंजूर था तो जो मान की जियारत का इंतजाम, दामन से अश्क पूछ के दिल से किया कलाम, इजहार एक बेकासी से सितम होगा और भी, देखा हमें उदास तो गम होगा और भी. Notice how ziyarat, the Arabic term for pilgrimage, is being used as a term for banavas over here. Chaudhary Jagat Mohan Lal Ravan's Musadda on Ramayan also uses Islamic motives, like here he say that ye aspo fil otego tabar faujo izdham, hum jogiyon ke qatl ka Allah re ehtimam. Sagar Nizami in his writings on Ram also mentions zindagi ki ruh tha, ruhaniyat ki shan tha, wo mujassim roop mein insan ke irfan tha. Munshi Dwarka Prasad Ufuk, he has written Shri Ram Natak, which were extensively performed at that point of time in Rajasthan and in Bihar. And he had also written Yak Kafiya Ramayan, which was published in 1914. It is important to notice that Sri Ram Natak opens with an opening prayer to Ganesh, which goes like Jai Jai Ganapati, etc. Munshi Jagannath Lal Khushtar is his translation of Ramayan, the Khushtar Ramayana, which was published in 1860, is one of the earliest found versions of Ramayana in Urdu, which starts with a prayer to Allah, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amar Kahani Nanzum Ramayana by Jogeshwar Nath Betab Barelvi and scores of other versions of Ramayana, often known by the author's names such as Ulfat Ki Ramayana or Rahmat Ki Ramayana, came into existence soon. Betab Barelvi's version, influenced by Ganga Jamuna tradition, carries the following descriptions of the Shakti Ban Ramayana. Reh reh ke de rahe the duhai huzur ki, kham ho gayi thi jang mein gardan gurur ki. Now, Ram in Urdu literature during independence movement suddenly started to move from the ideal family man, and Ramayana suddenly started changing from the story of a family tragedy, which was not only focused on Ram, but Ram, Lakshman, Sita, Bharat, and the fight of the thrones and the succession politics, etc. Suddenly, these stories became secondary, and the story that became the focus was Ram's journey to Lanka and Ram's emergence as a warrior king. So there has been a huge move from a local icon to a national icon during the colonial rule and emerging idea of Hindutva and Hindu Rashtra. For example, Zafar Ali Khan writes in Sri Ramchandar, नक्श तहजीब हुनूद अभी नुमाया है अगर तो वो सीता से है, लक्ष्मण से है और राम से है. There are many signs of the culture of Hinduism, then there are because of Sita, Lakshman and Ram. Notice how Ram is no longer an isolated figure of a royal family from Ayodhya. Now he is becoming a symbol of Hinduism and Hindu Rashtra per se. Saqib Salim argues that Allama Iqbal saw Ram as the perfect national warrior hero at that point of time, which would boost the morale of Indians under a colonial rule, who were looking for such a warrior, heroic national icon. कि हिंदियों के फिक्र है फलक रस का है असर, रिफत में आसमां से भी ऊंचा है बाम हिंद, है राम के वजूद पे हिंदुस्तान को नाज, अहले नजर समझते हैं उसको इमाम हिंद. Now, Ahle Nazar, the term obviously implies that it is Allama Iqbal's very personal point of view. So you can already notice that there is a sort of cautiousness. This poem was written in 1908, which was at the juncture of the communal violence or the communal tension that would erupt during the independence movement in India. So he is very cautiously mentioning that this is his personal point of view. Ahle Nazar. समझते हैं उसको इमाम हिंद as a religious head of India. Again, a movement towards a nationalist approach. तलवार का धनी था, सुजात में फर्द था, तकीज़गी में जोश मोहब्बत में फर्द था. So तलवार का धनी था. Again, the movement towards the warrior king attitude. Now, Raman in post-independence Urdu literature till 2000s. Anuradha Kapoor wrote in her 1989 essay Militant Images of a Tranquil God, published by the Times of India in 1989, that Ram was consciously being projected as a warrior king to assert a martial nature, that the Sangh Parivar wished to emphasize the communal atmosphere in the country. Now, Ram emerges at this point of time in Urdu poetry. Ram emerges as a symbol of resistance against communalism. He's no longer a local hero. He's no longer just a brother or a husband or a loving son who is being sent away to Banavas. Now he's a political figure and he's a focus of fiery polemics. For example, Dusra Banavas by Taifi Azmi, which was written after Babri Masjid demolition during 6th December 1992. This Nazam depicts Lord Rama returning from Banavas to his homeland and seeing Raqs-e Diwangi, the dance of madness, in his courtyard, and stains of blood on the banks of Sarju River. And he feels like as if he has been banished for the second time. 6 December को श्री राम ने सोचा होगा इतने दीवाने कहाँ से मेरे घर में आए. जगमती थे जहाँ राम के कदमों के निशान, प्यार की कहकश ने लेती थी अंगड़ाई जहाँ, मोर नफरत की उसी रगुजर में आए, धर्म क्या उनका था, क्या जात थी, ये जानता कौन, घर ना जलता तो उन्हें रात में पहचानता कौन. Rahbar Jaunpuri also writes in his poem Ram, ऐना एक खुलूस मोहब्बत यहाँ थे राम, अमन और शांति की जमानत यहाँ थे राम. So notice there is a constant reiteration of Shanti and Aman, peace and harmony, which is being associated with Ram. He laments that Rahbar is ये शरपसंद कहाँ और कहाँ वो राम. So he just laments looking at his countrymen, calling them Sharpasand or the evil ones, and compares them to the peaceful, harmonizing figure of Ram that has now departed. Even Kaviraj Shriji Gopal, in his introduction to the translation of Valmiki Ramayana, extensively laments the fact that where independence movement started with a goal of establishing Ram Rajya, eventually turned into shattered under communalism and communal violence. Ram in Urdu literature post 2000s, I don't want to say that it lacks importance, but now if you look at it, it loses its flair and flowery nature of the Urdu literature, the Urdu history that it originally had. When Ram naturally existed within the Urdu literary arena, you could see the sort of easiness, the sort of homeliness that the poets felt while writing about him. But now Ram, like quite distant from the homely figure that he was, the family man that he was, now is a icon of communal harmony, loaded with political motives, and there are aspects of secularist tokenism involved. Ram now is a sole figure of protest literature. And as I had pointed out in the earlier part of my paper, that Islamic religious motives existed very easily in the pre-independence literature, Urdu literature about Rama Ramayana, translations or original poetry. But now, if you notice, Islamic religious motives are strictly prohibited. No such confluence will be allowed any longer. Another interesting aspect that I have noticed by studying Urdu literature post 2000s, which comprises Ram, is that there is a very active role of public performance in it. Especially there are several writers and several performers who are trying to retrieve the lost art of Dastan Goi and Marsia Goi, and they are using Ram as a figure for that performance and to establish these lost arts. Mostly these plays would contain shairis, nazms, and sols. They would be a sort of a long poetry. Other than that, there have been recent translations. There have been publications of translations at Jaipur Literary Festival. Some recent translations would have Mahi Talat Siddiqui, Wadibul Dastani, who is a Lebanese poet, Syed Nazneel Nakhan Lal Thusu.
Deepanita, could you please come out?
Yeah, I will just take 2 more minutes. Just 1 more minute per se. So Urdu Ram Leela has been a recent topic of sensation. There have been repeated performances of Urdu Ram Leela. As I had referred earlier in my paper, that for Rakshanta Jalil, Urdu Ram Leela focused in her childhood like the most natural existence whatsoever. She used to see Urdu Ram Leela comprising Urdu verses like it was not a big deal, not something that was different, not something that was iconoclastic for that matter. But now there are separate performances as Urdu became Muslim and Hindi became Hindu per se. Now Urdu Ram Leela is a different deal altogether. So there are groups like Shri Shraddha Ram Leela who are using Urdu Ram Leela, who are performing Urdu Ram Leela. And then there is Dastane Ram by Professor Danish Iqbal, which is heavily influenced by the tradition of Dastan Goi and has various performance aspect of it. That there is a Jashan Kathak dance is being performed simultaneously on the stage. Here is Professor Danish Iqbal acting in his role as a Dastan Go per se, the one who tells the Dastan, the storyteller. Also, there is another play directed by Mahmood Farooqi, Dastan Jairamji Ki, which was recently performed in Allahabad, etc. Also, there is another Dastan Go, Ankit Chadha, who has been performing this play called Ram Chatha by himself, and this play to the Dastan-Goi intertextuality, and also it comprises of references to the Ramanujans, A.K. Ramanujan's 300 Ramayanas, etc. So by that, I would like to conclude my paper, and I would like to set my argument that Ramayana as a literature has inspired throughout generations, but now the attitude has changed and we have to rethink our position before sensationalizing Ram as a figure of Urdu literature and go back to the times, maybe still refer to the times when Ram just existed normally in Urdu literature.
Thank you, Deepanita. Thank you very much for a very comprehensive inclusion of Ram's personality as presented in Urdu literature. It's very informative and very enlightening that you have taken pains to collect all these things. There may be different opinions about whether Ram as a national icon emerged after independence or around that, before he was a local family hero. There may be differences, but I think, well, I will reserve time for questions at the end. Let all the presenters present the papers, then we'll invite questions. So thank you very much. I appreciate your paper. Thank you very much for your nice paper. Thank you. Now,
Mr. Merchant has come.
okay, sir. Thank you. Merchant, sir. Now it's your turn to present your paper, and please start. Give me a very brief bio note of yourself. Not audible. Can you hear my voice? Hello? Hello? Yeah. It's not audible. Just wait for me. Just wait.
Yes, I have unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Bharat. Now,
Yes,
Yeah, Namaskar and good afternoon to everyone. I'm very happy that to be part of this international conference, the webinar mode, organized by the Comparative Literature Association of India and the Bhagat Phool Singh Women's University. I have an interesting paper along with my wife, and we have taken 3 spiritual luminaries to look at, in a contemporary sense, what are those elements of the Bhakti movement and the Sufi teachings that can have relevance for our times. So I'm focusing on 3 spiritual luminaries. 2 of them are, of course, very well known in India, Sant Kabir Das and Guru Nanak Dev Ji. In fact, Guru Nanak Dev Ji's 550th birth anniversary was celebrated with great funfair throughout the world in 2019. And of course, Sant Kabir Das's Dohas and Sakhis, they are an evergreen theme. And oftentimes when we go to Varanasi every year, we do get a chance to get some new insights. But to a large majority in India, perhaps the writings, the Sufi writings of Baha'u'llah are not well known. So that's why the 2 of us, my wife and I, we chose this subject on the Bhakti poetry and Sufism. It was a very interesting presentation listening to Dr. Deepanvita Paul on the Rama Hind. So our purpose is how these 3 luminaries can help in a contemporary sense to better understand the relationship, the human dynamics, the relationship of the humans with their creator and with the rest of humanity. Because every path that we take, and it is true that there are multiple paths to the divine, and every individual has a complete freedom, and this is what we have learned in the Sufi tradition. We also learn in the Bhakti movement, and we also learn from the diversity of various religious communities. After all, there is a convergence. So in an endeavor to look at this mystical path, our purpose is how to walk this path collectively. And at the end of the day, we have to walk this mystical path with practical feet. So looking at the current global pandemic, we know that the concepts of interdependence and the concepts of oneness are also an important dimension of the poetry of Sant Kabir Das as well as Guru Nanak Dev and the writings of Baha'u'llah. So I'd like to, of course, while Baha'u'llah and the Baha'i faith may be better known outside of India, yet Guru Nanak Dev and Kabir Das are also equally well known. And we have taken a few of their writings in English translations and juxtaposed them to better understand how this Sufi path and the Bhakti movement provide us a convergence which can call for a spiritual renaissance in the present day world. Because after all, the purpose of every spiritual luminary who have appeared, whether their verses have been in the form of a protest on the current or contemporary times in which they lived, or they came with a futuristic concept of the society whereby in the evolutionary paradigm of our spiritual existence, there would be a greater convergence. As the horizon of human race expanded to embrace the entire planet, there has been many shifts. So while we look at the language, of course, Baha'u'llah wrote in Persian and Arabic, while the dohas of Sant Kabir Das, they are in this own genre of that time. And then Guru Nanak Dev's utterances again take on the contemporary language medium. And the purpose in all of this was how, from the position of the Ishq-e Mijazi, the position of Ishq-e Hakiki can be better understood. Because each one encounters the beloved in a very unique way. And that's why we have the narratives of Layla and Majnun, we have of Radha and Krishna, we have of Romeo and Juliet, and like that, there are many other similar instances. So while Sant Kabir Das' message of equality freed human beings from the burden of blind faith and unnecessary rituals, which is very relevant to our times as it was in the 15th century, likewise, Guru Nanak's aim was to bring about unity between the two majority populations of his times, the Hindu and Muslims. That's why he said, "Na koi Hindu, na koi Musalman." And the celebration of his birth anniversary 2 years ago again played a very important landmark. While Baha'u'llah, in his writings, he talks about the global situation, because he has pinned the mystical yearnings of the Hindu and he has of the Muslims, and made it a global phenomenon by stating the tabernacle of unity had been raised, regard ye not one another as strangers, ye are the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch. Kindle the fire of love and burn away all things, then set thy foot into the land of lovers. So the mystical journey that each one of us has to undertake must parallel with the practical dimensions of our existential reality. And in this scope, we need to better understand the concept of the unity of the cosmic divine and the concept of diversity, which is an equally pervasive principle. So as human beings are able to better appreciate both these concepts, there will be surely an emergence of a world movement, just as the Bhakti movement of the several centuries ago created a spiritual renaissance. Likewise, today, what humanity needs in order to move away from the strong paradigm of materialism and on the one hand, and extreme forms of hedonism on the other, to a balanced spiritual path. So, to this end, I'd like to share one of the dohas of Kabir, wherein he says, "Ranghi se rang upje, sab rang dekha ek, kaun rang hai jiska taka kurho vivek. Color springs from color, I see all shades in one. What is the soul's color? And that's what you must discern." And in this connection, Baha'u'llah says, "By my beauty, all will I gather beneath the one colored covering of the dust." And he says, "All these diverse colors, save them that choose my own." And that is the purging of every color. So we see that diversity was never intended to be a cause of any kind of conflict, which today unfortunately engulfs the human race. So when you look at the Bhakti movement and also parallel it with the Sufi endeavors and the Sufi movement, which from Arabia and Persia then impacted very greatly India, we can find that there are many very interesting parallels. So the Bhakti movement, as far as I understand, originated in southern India in the 7th century. It spread across North India between the 15th and the 17th centuries. And Kabir was among the earliest and the best known proponents of the movement in the North, because Bhakti in essence means unconditional devotion and love for the Almighty. And this is what the Sufi Murshids also teach us. They teach us that our God Almighty is one, and we need to, in order to attain our goal, we will need to have an unconditional love towards our divine cosmic being. How do we do it? So they emphasize that there is the importance of sticking to the law, the Shariat, and they emphasize that one should not deviate even a hair's breadth from the path, the tariqat. Because if the ultimate reality, the hakikat, is to be found, is to be attained, then following the path is most important. So what kind of a path should humanity now adopt in this age of globalization is our goal. And in order to do that, first of all, we need to appreciate the concept of the oneness of our divinity, the concept of the oneness of the different spiritual streams, the concept of the oneness of the different spiritual streams that come to humanity, and the concept of the oneness of humankind. It is on the bedrock of these three principles that the flowering of the Sufi endeavor as well as the Bhakti movement yield their fairest fruits. And there is no other challenge greater than this before humanity. Baha'u'llah, in the Seven Valleys, his best known mystical work, he says, "In all these journeys, the traveler must stray not the breadth of a hair from the law, for this indeed is the secret of the path and the fruit of the tree of truth. In all these stages, he must cling to the robe of obedience to the divine commandments and hold fast to the cord of shunning all that is forbidden, so that he may be nourished from the cup of the law of God and informed of the mysteries of truth." So, given the limitations of time, we know that we cannot dwell too much on the linguistic genres or the many historical contexts. Nevertheless, today, India, of course, is one place which again has to set the example. And I'd like to invite briefly Mr. Merchant to also share both a little bit of the Persian as well as the English translation on the spiritual journey that we are supposed to be all undertaking together.
Please take,
Please.
as we are running out of time, please take.
Just 2 minutes for her.
Okay.
Is there is time? Yes, good evening, everyone. Actually, thank you for giving me this opportunity to be part of this event. But I was wondering if I have 7 minutes? Or
We are running out of time because.
I just read one of the stanza of Abdullah's writing in his
Please
Persia.
take 2-3 minutes only, please, madam, because there are the speakers.
And then, okay, here it says, in Persian it says, Bename Guyande Tabana. Can you mute that, please? ای صاحبان هوش و گوش، اول سروش دوست این است: ای بلبل معنوی، جز در گلبن معانی جای مگزین، و ای هدهد سلیمان عشق، جز در سبای جانان وطن مگیر، و ای عنقای بقا، جز در قاف وفا محل مپذیر. این است مکان تو، اگر بلا مکان به پر جان برپری، و آهنگ مکان خود رایگان داری. And now in English it says, in the name of the Lord of the utterance, the Almighty, O ye people that have minds to know and ears to hear. The first call of the beloved is this: O mystic nightingale, abide not but in the rose garden of the spirit. O messenger of the Solomon of love, seek thou no shelter except in the Sheba of the well-beloved. And O immortal phoenix, dwell not save on the mount of faithfulness. Therein is thy habitation. If on wings of thy soul thou soarest to the realm of infinite and seekest to attain thy goal. Actually, here Baha'u'llah is calling humanity to understand the true purpose of their lives, and also talks about the soul, which is divinity in us. And it says that in order to advance our soul, we need to have good relationship with each other. We need to actually develop those qualities, virtues, which is inherent in our soul. And because the life is not only has a physical aspect, life has a spiritual aspect, and our true life is the life of our soul. With death, our life ends, but our soul lives for eternity. So that's how through worship, through prayer, through service, we need to actually enhance the life of our soul and be more at peace. Yeah, sorry, I'm so sorry. This much. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much, Mr. and Mrs. Merchant. Let me congratulate you that you have presented your papers very well. Unfortunately, you couldn't get as much time as you deserve to get. But nonetheless, it's very fine, very enlightening. And Mr. Merchant has established common strands of unity of being between Sant Kabir, Guru Nanak and Baha'u'llah. That's very enlightening. Thank you very much. I congratulate you both of you for a very nice presentation. Thank you once again. I wish I had enough time to listen to you both. But anyway, thank you very much. And let me call the last. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much. So nice. Very happy to listen to your talks. Both of you presented very well. Thank you. Thank you very much. So now it's time for me to call the last speaker, because at 6 o'clock, one foreign speaker is there, Mugammil. So let me invite them. Just a minute. I'll find them. ये डिस्चार्ज हो गया क्या? May I call the next speakers, please? Bohra and Kumari, some Kumari. the last speakers, Mr. Bora and some, what's the name? Some Kumari, I'm forgetting the name.
Sir, Praveen Kumari and Anupama Vora.
Yes, Parveen Kumari and Anupama. May I request them to present their papers and take, because at 6 o'clock, Madam Bogomil has to present her paper. So I request them to be as brief as they can. Are they here?
They are listening to your voice.
Huh?
They are listening to your voice.
Anupama Bora and what's another name?
Just open the password. Just open. Please open. Just open. Please.
Huh?
Sir, I don't think they are here.
Hello?
Sir, I don't think they are here. Because they have not joined yet.
Rindon? Who is speaking? Rindon?
No, sir, this is
Ghosh is speaking.
Yes.
Shukla Sahab, they are not here because you have made an announcement and the organizers have also tried to see if they have registered. And it seems they have not registered for this session. So I think in that case you can wind up and this session, and so that we can go on punctually to the next session.
Okay, thank you, sir. So let me take this opportunity to wind this up and thank all the speakers, Deepanita Paul and Mr. and Mrs. Merchant for their very nice, at least for me, it was very enlightening presentation, both of you, both the speakers. And I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
So I end this and I request the organizers to start the next one, the arrangement. And thank you very much. God bless you for your nice presentation. Let's wind it up.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Sir, there is 8
Can I
minutes
speak?
of time.
We have still 2 minutes, so I would like to say 2 things.
Yeah.
One, of course, the 2 presentations. One, the status of Ram, and the second on the status of oneness.
Yeah.
And Madam Mehnaz, they were all wonderful. They were to the point. It was a resurrection of Rama in the condition, and particularly we heard so many luminary things in Urdu regarding Ram, and it was very befitting. So I know my friend and Madam Mehnaz, they are devoted to this. They are not only doing it theoretically, but they are doing it practically. They are serving the interfaith movement. They are working day and night for that. And I really hail them, appreciate them, and honored for coming to this conference. So my best wishes and my heartiest congratulations to both of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to the
Thank
chair
you so much,
also.
sir. Thank you so much for the.
No, I would like to thank the chair. We have to trace him since morning. And ultimately, he himself came. It was his love for the comparative literature. He has been with us over 2 decades. So I respect and I appreciate your concern, Shukla Sahab. You have done it very well. Thank you very much.
Nice, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Now you can take up your next one.
Yes, the last session, much awaited session, because our very grand old personality, Bogomil, is here. She has been, she woke up at 5 a.m. in the morning because of the time zone difference. And now she will be the last speaker. So I appreciate Bogomil, your patience and and all that. So may we request Ifsa Chanda, is she here?
Yes, I am.
No,
Yes, I
you are
am.
here. Ifsa Chanda. Ifsa Chanda is
Yes,
the
sir. Ma'am has joined just now.
Ifsa Chanda is here.
Yes, sir.
No.
She must be here, yeah? There she is.
Yes, she has come. She has come.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Ifsa ji,
Yeah.
most welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Ultimately, you have come.
Yeah, I just managed.
So she has come. She will take over now.
It's still 4 minutes to take over, sir.
Okay. We can wait for 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Let me make sure
We
that
can wait for 4 minutes. Okay.
Just let me make sure that the CLI conference has the music. You can hear me, Tias or the others? You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
For
We
the
can hear you.
music, it will go?
Where is the music?
Yes, I will have some music examples. And
Okay. Yes, you will have a music example, so you know how to present the music example, right?
Tias or the
Tias will do it for you.
will do
Okay.
it.
Yes, ma'am. The links are ready.
All right.
I hope it will work.
That's okay.
Yes.
That's okay.
That's okay.
जी सर शुक्ला जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम कैसे हैं
थैंक यू वेरी मच बहुत नमस्कार
Hello.
2 साल बाद आप बहुत
हाँ
आपको भी Bogomil
Hello, yes, Shukla. Hello.
and one thing more last Deepanvita,
Deepanvita, you have done very well.
yes, you have done very well. I wish I had time to talk to you on Raman because my interest is also Raman, particularly Valmiki Raman.
Yes.
That can be.
No, I would love to continue this conversation over emails if you allow me. I have a lot to learn, as you can understand that I am a plain neophyte in this. So I have a lot to learn from you. So maybe we could extend this conversation over emails if you allow me.
Okay, Deepanta. Thank you very much. And
Thank you very much, sir, for your-
welcome you again to India. And you have been very nice to us in Vienna also. And I remember each and every.
Thank you.
Thank you
I
very
remember
much.
that with great pleasure. Thank you, Shukla.
जी कहाँ जा रहे हैं अब कहाँ जा रहे हैं
You take it, sir. I'm giving it.
हाँ
I'm giving it to you. That's all.
म्यूट कीजिए ठीक है we'll start in 2 minutes time
So, yeah. Der geht.
so the links are with Tiash already and she knows when to play them, right?
No, I will play them in the middle of my conference, of my
Okay.
paper.
Okay, so you'll say when.
And then I say when, yes.
When you say when, right?
Yes. And the CLI conference must intervene because I gave it to them.
They will do it.
They will do
Whenever you give a cue, we will play the video.
I have one thing which is a little, one thing I want to know. We are not being able to have any time for questions. Is that the case?
So I have about half an hour to speak, and then with some
And it is
small. I think we have some time. I think
We should
I
have time
an
for
hour-
questions. That's. I mean, like, yeah,
I think we will have some
yeah.
time.
We make time for questions.
Yes. Yeah. I think it will do.
Ma'am, before you begin, I would like to introduce the chair of the session. If you can-
No, you don't.
Yeah.
That is what
Yeah.
you're doing.
No,
like, officially.
no. It's okay.
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 Carry on.
We still have 1 more minute. So, no, okay. I think yes, we can start.
Yes.
And
So- Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, it's very strange to say a very warm welcome to Professor Sigil Bogomil because she never goes away. She's always with us. And she has been with us for a very, very long time. These are some of the things that the Comparative Literature Association of India has given us, actually, because I see many people here who are probably here for the first time. So one of the things that is an advantage of our association is that we have such friends as Professor Bogumil, who are always with us, not only in spirit and virtually, but also quite frequently in the flesh.
Yes.
And since
Yes.
and you know, it's a matter of great pleasure to always have her, because we have worked together for a very long time, and she has a long career as, you know, what we are not very well acquainted with, that is a classical comparatist with very many languages and a very broad and eclectic vision, I must say, because I mean, it's such a pleasure to interact with Professor Bogumil. If you look at her bio, which is published in the Souvenir, like everybody else's bio, I just don't want to go into all of that, because I mean, the bio shows that her work ranges from Rousseau to Celan. And she has been working since the 70s till the last book, which was published in 2020. So, I mean, it's a great privilege for us always to interact with Professor Bogumil, and we will just immediately request her to begin. And as she promised, she will speak for, let's say, 45 minutes at the most, and then we will have 15 minutes to discuss this. Yes, Professor Bogumil.
So thank you very, very much, Ipsita, and I'm really touched, and I don't merit all you say, but it is true. I have worked from Rousseau to Celan, and my work of Rousseau, that is my PhD in Germany. And I must say, when I wrote this paper, I remembered very much of Public Taste and the 1001 Night and so on. So I come back to Rousseau, to my first work as Romanist comparative. So thank you very much, and I thank the organizers, Chandra, Mohan, and all the organizers, to have invited me again and again and again. And I thank you really very much, because I feel so acquainted to you that I really come over, if it is possible, with pleasure. And it always is an inspiration for me, your items, your topics of the conferences, because it is true, the relationship to India, I never did it. And now, since years, I do it. And it is for me so fruitful and such an inspiration. So thank you very much for that also. So I will begin at once. Still one thing in the announcement, it is to undot instead of to run dot. And if I were now a radical feminist, I would say, oh, you see, that is like that the oppression of women begins. It begins with language. And you mutilated already the language. But don't worry, I'm not a radical feminist, and it is for me not worthwhile saying anything. So let's begin. 800 years of Turandot's Me Too resistance. The beginning of the history of the European reception of the Turandot subject is in a way quite both surprising and amusing at the same time, for it calls to mind the biblical David and Goliath narrative. The small David with his staff and sling who defeats the oversized and well-armed Goliath. The same happens in the Turandot theme. The impact of the 1001 Nights throughout Europe since the first publication in France in 1704 is well known. On the other hand, Netzame's narrative Half Pekar, and I hope I pronounce roughly recognizably, the Seven Beauties, was still unknown by this time. It was translated into German in 1841 only, 43 even only, then later into English in 1924. However, soon after the Arabic Goliath of 1001 Nights, a kind of little David compared to the impressive Goliath of Antoine Galland, the translator, followed. The question is one of the translation of compilation of Persian tales by François Petit de la Croix entitled The 1001 Days. It is less known by the posterity, though it made quite an impact at the time of its publication from 1710 to 1712, but had nothing comparable with the impact of the 1001 Nights. On one of the tales of the 1001 Days is the narrative of Turandot, as the heroine was called then. It is a popular adaptation of Nizami's tale, The Princess of Slavonia Under the Red Pavilion, as part of what is considered a masterpiece of Islamic medieval narrative literature, The Pavilion of Seven Princesses, the Half-Pecker. In this version, the Russian princess who lives on the highest summit of the Caucasus Mountains has become a Chinese princess, daughter of the Emperor of China. Chinese references were in fashion in the 18th century and even later. People were mad about it, so to speak. Russia, on the other hand, was without interest. Settling the plot in this region would have immediately diminished the allure of the play. Yet the new humble shape of Nizami's Turandot, the small David as it were, has started off on the path of a triumphant Western European success, leaving Aladdin and other famous Goliath figures behind her. This brilliant career is due to the multiplicity of the most diverse and forceful personalities that have been attributed to the heroine during the following centuries. Moreover, it could be related to the taste and to the philosophical ideas, and the fact that it was adaptable to different medias, especially to the opera, also plays a decisive role with regard to the long-lasting reception of the Turandot figure. Indeed, there are about 13 opera settings, but also a ballet, about 7 theater plays, some films, and a radio play. The first adaptation of Turandot to the stage was carried out in 1729 by the famous playwright and novelist Alain René Lesage, who lived from 1668 to 1747. The play was entitled The Princess of China. The heroine was called Diamantine and her lover, the Prince Nureddin. Beside them appeared characters of the Commedia dell'arte, thus the Italian form. Thus, the play was a kind of parody of the fairy tale in the 1001 Days. Since then, there were numerous dramatic rewritings of the play throughout Europe. In 1762, the Italian Count Carlo Gozzi took the figure on stage in his eponym play, which became in Italian Turandot. Gozzi was at that time a highly appreciated playwright, known for his so-called fairy plays, which had a tremendous success. Turandot, however, was less applauded because the public did not find as many magical and fantasy elements in it as in the other plays written by Gozzi, the most famous of them, The Love of the Three Oranges. To remember the plot briefly, Turandot, daughter of the Emperor of China, is of outstanding beauty. Excuse me, I must get back. Yes, I am back there. Is of outstanding beauty and intelligence. She considers the latter a guarantee of her freedom. For indeed, she hates men and does not, my PC doesn't, okay. Indeed, she hates men and does not want to get married. If they want to, they have to solve 3 riddles. She is presenting them at the court. If they fail, they will be beheaded. The play begins with an arrival of the Prince Khalaf, who remains incognito. He solves the riddles. Turandot feels her pride and reputation offended. She does not accept her defeat and asks for more riddles to solve. This time, Khalaf presents a riddle to her. Relating briefly his misfortune and that of his father, he asks her to find their names. The next day, against the expectation of the court and the public, she pronounces the names, but confesses immediately after that she discovered them not due to her intelligence, but by trickery. She agrees to get married with the prince because meanwhile, her love has become dominant and she even asks all men for forgiveness. Less than a fantasy world, the play stresses logical arguments which lead Turandot to finally surrender and admit to her trickery and her love. That means, in the perspective of the 18th century, that Turandot at the end of the play reveals herself a woman as normal as any other woman. If the plot was not exactly what attracted the public, the form of the play, however, was. It perfectly meets the taste of the public with the subtitle of the play, which the subtitle of the play announces a bit heavily. Fiaba Chinese Teatrale Tragicomica, tragicomic theatrical Chinese fable. It indicates a mixture of the taste in fashion, imagination, seriousness, and entertainment. The amusement is produced by the implication of the witty, or in this case, rather silly commedia dell'arte figures, as for instance Pantalone, who is the secretary of the Emperor of China, or Tartaglia, the Chancellor of China, and so on. They are all mixed up with the serious persons of the highly dramatic plot without any differentiation. The result has a threefold effect. First, an impression of the medieval plays where comic and dramatic, even tragic scenes alternate. This has an effect of certain progressiveness insofar as the modern playwriters tend to oppose the strong classical dramatic form. Second, as humor and drama not only alternate, but are also intertwined, for example, the Emperor of China speaks seriously to his secretary Pantalone and gets a witty answer, the Chinese court as a whole is made to look ridiculous. This ironic effect of distancing is recurrent in the play and runs through it like a thread. It thus enables the public to enjoy the most ridiculous scenes while giving the impression of being extremely critical of the scenery and the whole play, whereas the spectators are purely and simply giving way to meet their desire of entertainment. Yet it is a fact that the Chinese setting in the 18th century implied necessarily a ridiculous view of the profoundly unknown country. The third result is the revalorization of the commedia dell'arte, which has been criticized and dismissed from the stage as a static theatrical form. Gozzi succeeded in re-establishing it on stage, thus taking position against Goldoni's defense of a realistic theater. The public was still looking for fairies on stage, for amusement, and finally for the kind of fantasy adventures of the medieval fabulous novels of chivalry. And by the way, I must say, Rousseau had to fight against this taste. What has all this to do with Nizami's slave beauty of the Red Pavilion? The answer is nothing. It is recognized that receptions and consequently translations of literary works do not exactly take over the philosophy and ideas of the original work. Yet, what happened to Nizami's Turandot story goes beyond this superficial kind of transport or not of ideas. the deep mysticism and morality of the tale of the Red Pavilion may even not have been understood since the later Persian adaptation of the story translated by François Petit de la Croix. This can be supposed insofar as this later prose version replaced the princess in the context of, quote, the ordinary Iranian mythology, unquote, and its northern mythic region traditionally called Turan, hence the name Turandot. As a result of the mythological framework, the mysticism of Nizami's story disappeared. Accordingly, the riddles became simple riddles instead of Nizami's sophisticated, mystic, enigmatic pearl play between the princess and her suitor. And mystic in the sense you have presented papers of all along of the conference now, so of the meeting now, so in this profound sense of mysticism. The riddles will change in every adaptation or rewriting. Schiller even conceived 3 new riddles for each of the 14 representations of his play, and even Goethe joined him to make up some. One might say that first so-called infidelity of the Persian version has caused the following one. The person and the plot of Turandot were like a clay mass under the pencil of the playwright Gozzi, which he could form accordingly to the taste of the public. This was all the more the case since the historical consciousness appeared only about 50 years later. Thus, Gozzi was free to meet the taste of his public, who went to the exoticism, and he did so to the full. Consequently, the question is what kind of person Turandot had become in this imaginative Chinese tragicomedy. At the end, she reveals herself a normal woman who has fallen in love with the prince, as mentioned above. Yet the plot is not as simple as it seems. When the prince, Khalaf, had solved her 3 riddles and she did not accept her defeat, not only her cruelty became dominating, and her knowledge was considered stubborn, ambitious, proud, and even arrogant. Yet her honesty gives her back the sympathy of the people and the recognition of her outstanding knowledge. She is a learned woman and beyond capable of human feelings. Indeed, as the plot progresses, her love for the prince also appears progressively. Yet she hesitates between pride and love and finally represses her feelings in order to give place to her ambition to defeat the prince and thus take her revenge on him. The result is she becomes a kind of a ridiculous automate. Hence, one can hardly speak of a psychological development, so that the dramatic turn is quite surprising when, at the very end of the play, Turandot regrets having misjudged men and asks for their forgiveness. It thus becomes obvious that Turandot's Me Too resistance was just based on a misunderstanding. And what about the Prince Khalaf? In the midst of all this chaos, he remains firm and determined in his love. This lack of psychology may have incited Friedrich Schiller to consider both figures puppets. Furthermore, as a theoretician of theater, Schiller is opposed to the mixture of tragic and comic forms. Why then did he adapt the play, which in fact he did not adapt but rewrite? At the beginning, Schiller had in mind, but, and I quote, the need of our theater, unquote. His intention was to transcribe the German prose translation into a verse version, a kind of stylistic exercise without any aesthetic ambition. But soon he became more involved in the play and wanted to transform it in, quote, a new and interesting piece of theater, giving it a higher value in order to enrich the German stage, unquote, while acquiring, quote, some merit, unquote, on his own. In 1.5 months, the work was done, And the first night took place on the 30th of January 1802 under the direction of Goethe. It seems that Schiller had really fallen in love not with Gozzi's Turandotte, but with the play as a raw material, which he changed in many respects. The Commedia dell'arte figures became serious advisors and ministers of the Chinese emperor. Even though there may be some hints to their witty origins, the scenery of China is taken seriously. At the same time, Schiller transforms the play into a real psychological drama where Turandot confesses her love for Calaf since the very moment when she saw him for the first time. Quote, "Oh heaven, what happens to me? No one until now appeared at the divan who knew to move this heart. This one knows about the art for doing it." Unquote. In the same way, Calaf's love for Turandot is dramatically pointed out. Quote, "Complain about me, cry for the unfortunate. I here have neither wish nor will. Irresistibly by force it sweeps me away. It is mightier than I am." Unquote. Calaf is a tragic person, and yet he resembles in a certain way the obstinate persons of Molière's, as for instance the misanthrope. That is to say that Schiller's Calaf is as well as Turandot, are characterized by a certain comic trait. It is the reason why Schiller did not change the subtitle of Gozzi's play, a tragicomic fairy tale. The tragic and the comic are mutually increasing. Goethe has recognized it, as well as later on Thomas Mann, who considered this intertwinement the highest achievement of the modern spirit of art, and it was a quote. The Me Too situation is also morally and beyond, in a pathetic way, intensively emphasized. The defense of Turandot's intelligence and beauty, which in Gozzi's play reflects a kind of stubborn attitude, becomes a convincing claim for freedom and an attack on men who demean women and condemn them to slavery, but on the other hand, desire to possess all they consider delightful, even though they have to go by force. But mainly it is a defense of Turandot's beauty, for which she also claims freedom, while Schiller's highly pathetic, succinct, and precise language emphasizes the pathos of her plea, but also of the whole play. The prince comments especially on the last topic. He points to men in different situations, risking their lives in order to possess goods of less value than beauty has. Quote, "the first and highest of all possessions," unquote, as he says, and he accepts that Turandot asks such a high price for acquiring it. This defense is in a certain sense a shortcut of the philosophical and aesthetical ideas of Schiller. Thus, he gives a higher value to the play of Gozzi as he had intended to do, and transform Turandot's Me Too resistance into a defense of human rights. In Schiller's adaptation of the play, Turandot culminated in the feminist and aesthetic commitment. Giacomo Puccini knew the play, which had been translated into Italian, but he ordered a new libretto based on Gozzi's play without the Commedia dell'arte characters, though their new names, Ping, Pang, Pong, still remember the witty figures. Furthermore, he asked his two librettists to assign a different motive to Turandot for resisting and being cruel. Accordingly, her new motivation is her desire for avenging the kidnapping, rape, and murder of her ancestors of, quote, thousand years before. Puccini kept on changing. He introduced the young slave Liu, who has fallen in love with the prince and sacrifices herself for him. The composer's intention was to provide an example of an unconditional love which would soften the flinty heart of Turandot. as he wrote to one of his two librettists in 1922. Puccini died in 1924 without having ended his opera. He had just the time to finish the sacrifice of Liu. Yet his manuscripts show that the change of Turandot from a resistant and cruel to a loving person ensued. The subsequent problems of composing this short finale may be skipped here. Suffice to say that the world premiere took place in 1926 at the Scala at Milano under the direction of Toscanini. Rather, what is important in the present context is to notice that due to the substantial changes, the libretto had lost its philosophical and aesthetic commitment and became a text full of passion and emotion, a modern soul drama, so to speak. This is not a big surprise considering the impact Romanticism had also on Italy. Verdi's operas had imposed the new romantic sentimental taste on opera stage, while on the other hand, the composer was introducing a new and naturally fluid musical discourse in consequence of the new naturalistic movement in literature and art. All this one can find also in Puccini's oeuvre. In fact, time and aesthetics has changed, yet the most important reason of the new style is the media change Puccini's Turandot brought about. It means a leap from the spoken word to singing and orchestral music, hence from a rational form of communication to mainly emotional means of communication, at least as far as the opera of the second half of the 19th century is concerned. And Puccini profited from it to the full again, for he could be sure to thus meet the prevailing taste. Indeed, until present times, Turandot is appreciated for the beauty of its numerous arias, including the famous Nessun Dorma. I don't play it here, but it is the most famous aria of the play. It's only, a completely new vision of Turandot's Me Too resistance ensued. It simply gets lost, drowns in passion, and ends in rapturous love. Quote, Turandot, "Do not touch me, stranger, it is a sacrilege." Calaf, "No, your kiss gives me the eternity," unquote. And the prince passionately embraces and kisses her, as the stage direction indicates, and Turandot swooned. Yet, the Chinese stage setting is surprising, considering that the Romanticism had put a spotlight on the Near and Middle East, whereas the following mainstream Verismo, the equivalent of the French naturalism, was concerned with social problems on stage. These two movements had brought the taste of exoticism of the 18th century to an end, one would almost assume. However, the desire for exoticism was repressed but not forgotten. The first Opium War between China and Britain, 1839 to 1842, caused a new and at the same time old Chinese fervor. In France, similar to the Chinese references during the previous century, the plays now are comic as well, even fantastic, without being related to the political military facts which did bring the old passion back into the public's memory. This enthusiasm for the Chinese setting will be again nourished by the Second Opium War, 1856 to 1860, when France joined the British Army. A certain difference was perceptible, however. Even though people were still interested in fancy ideas and fantastic imagery, they wanted to become acquainted with the reality of China. Again, Puccini met the taste of his public. Actually, Turandot is based on a magical material, but from the musical point of view, the composer was looking for original musical patterns as well as original instruments, which were particularly percussion ones. such as the tam-tam, different kinds and tubular bells, a xylophone, and a bass xylophone specially produced for the turandot, and others. Examples of old Chinese music integrated in the orchestral parts are the famous song Mo Li Wa, Jasmine in translation, which accompanies the entries of turandot, but also sounds at different moments in the opera. Furthermore, two different forms of a temple march. And finally, the part of Liu is exclusively arranged in a pentatonic way. And the major pentatonic scale, and for those who know notes, C, D, E, G, A, being the basic scale for the music of China and other South Asian, East Asian musical traditions. Due to these innovations, Puccini's Turandot is not counted among the group of works belonging to the artistic movement of the Verismo, but it is considered an experimental opera because all the so now I would like to give you an example, and I will give you the example of Turandot's part when she declares why she doesn't want to get married because just of her desire of avenging her ancestors. So you could, and at once afterwards, I give you a short 1 minute and even not 2 minutes example of the direction of at New York, in New York, because it shows you how much this opera inspires directors to have a fantastic decorum, which is worth of Bollywood and Hollywood. So, if you please could insert the music now.
In questo reggio or son minanni mille, un grido desperato risuonò, e quod grevo traverso stirpe stirpe, qui dell'anima mea si rifugiò. Principessa allora, dolce e serena, che regnavi nel tuo cupo silenzio, in gioia pura, e sfidaste inflessibile e sicura l'aspro dominio. Oggi rivive in me.
And listen to the orchestra behind because it is local touch, Chinese local touch. Yeah?
Should I continue playing it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Fusgamento e terrore rompo d'ormi, il regno vinto, e l'unica mia va trascinata,
So yeah. So and now the met, yeah. You could,
Do you want me to play the second one?
yes, please.
Yes.
1 minute. Yes.
nel tempo che ciascun ricorda, pus come i tuoi temori non d'ordine, e la gloria del tuo regno
Yes, that's it. So you see, the sounds of the orchestra were really new, and the public was enthusiastic. So, well, so now I will come, and you see the direction, the settings also. There are so fantastic settings for this opera. It is really inspiring, it seems. So now the last pages, 2 pages still, not much, even not. The story of Turandot continues to live particularly because of Puccini's opera and its many catchy songs, because all the arias are known in this opera. This does not mean that its literary impact would have come to an end. Besides the Swiss novelist Cécile Inès Loos, who transformed the subject into a novel, so back to a novel, The Riddles of Turandot, 2 German playwrights revisited the topic after World War II. But do they still deal with the drama of Gozzi, or at least the raw material Schiller had got excited by? Brecht, the most famous of both playwrights, may give the answer. The mere title of this last epic drama he wrote, is as astonishing as it is revealing. Turandot, or the Whitewashers' Congress. It loudly points out that this Turandot has not much to do with the traditional play. The content confirms it. In order to escape the crisis of a surplus cotton production, the Emperor of China makes a vast harvest in his own granary secretly disappear. An increase in price ensues and people become agitated. The situation is all the more dangerous for the emperor since a new leader of the people, Kai Ho, is near the capital. Hence, the emperor looks for a possibility to explain the high prices and the shortage. His brother finds a solution, the Tuis, and this name is an acronym of a word play on intellectual. It is telect, jewel, in, so T-U-I. The Tuis then are considered, so the intellectuals, the Jews then are considered to enter into a battle of wits to find out the best explanation for the situation. The prize for the best liar is Turandot, who is a nymphomaniac and depraved to the core. The losing candidates are beheaded. This structure is maintained. It follows a demagogic confusion supported by the review form of the play. The critique of the intellectuals causes most comic situations, as for instance, when a beheaded Chewy continues speaking and arguing. Finally, a chewing monkey, Gogagog, who has become a bandit, presents a brilliant, and here that means an utmost cynical idea. The questioning of the high prices has to be forbidden. Evidently, he can be married with the princess. So, after having been chosen as the future husband of Turandot, he is seeming terror and fright among the people. He burns half of the granaries, which makes the prices increase still further, and he persecutes the supposed arsonists. All social classes begin to solidarize with each other, and when Gog is about to marry Turandot and thus legitimate his claim to the throne, the troops of Kai Ho enter into the capital. They chase the imperial clique and the Gog gang away with the aim of installing a new social and political order. In spite of the review form, the play is an epic drama as Brecht understands it. Actually, a poor peasant coming with his grandson to the capital in order that he should be accepted at the elite school of the Jews to become one of them, is soon aware of the abuse of power and the miserable role they play, and he is critically commenting on the plot, often launched by the questions of his grandson. It is most obvious that this social-political historical satire and parable seals Turandot's fate. It would go beyond the scope of the present paper to follow all these items which constituted the plot. For the same reason, all the literary stimulations, certainly not influences, have to be skipped. There are many, since the first appearance of the name of Turandot in a notebook of about 1922. Brecht wrote the play in 1900. It was only put on stage after his death in 1956. It was the performance was in 1969 at the Schauspielhaus of Zurich. The author himself pointed to the fact that the play is a part of a voluminous literary complex that deals with the abuse of the intellect and the critique of the system conformance of the intellectuals, the Jews. Brecht worked on it from 1930 to 31 to 1942. It is known today as the Dewey novel fragment. And to finish, to come back to Turandot's Me Too resistance. Apparently, with Brecht, it comes to an end, and Turandot falls back into the worst period of the oppression of women, where she is alienated from herself, completely perverted. Unconsciously, she suffers from the situation the first Turandot, the heroine of Nizami, is however aware of, and which she opposes. This is, it seems, where it comes full circle. Yet, the Brechtian message is different. There is no circle from Brecht back to the Nizami. Rather, the situation has become worse over the years. One remembers the theory of history of Walter Benjamin, and you remember the angel of history, which goes forward and looks back, and behind the angel sees all the mass of destruction history has produced. Hence, women have to struggle even more to free themselves, and the best would be, according to the playwright, by unifying with the others. A plea for the Me Too movement, one would say. Thank you. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, even if we are clapping, probably you won't be able to hear us. Oh yeah, it's an amazingly long journey from the 12th century to the 20th.
Oh yeah.
And, yeah. And also, you know, some things change and some things don't change at all.
Yeah.
So, okay, we'll open it up to questions. We have some time. We have at least 10 minutes. So,
Sridhar,
yeah.
are you hearing me?
I do, yes. Very well.
No, I tell you, it was a wonderful presentation, because over the last 2-3 years in India, we have been hearing Me Too. It has gone viral. It has become a global phenomenon.
Yes.
And in India, I tell you, so many hidden cases of sexual harassment had come to the fore. Now, I wanted to ask you two things. Do you think that in France, this kind of thing had happened? My question is that, do you think in France, this kind of global phenomenon in the garb of this phrase, Me Too, had happened? And if so, was it a new one, or did they get something from this story which you have presented very elaborately?
So in France, as you say, the Me Too movement is a global one. That is right. And so it exists in France also. But, you know, they are still fighting and they are in the middle of fighting. And at the moment, well, there are, of course, there are some effects, but, you know, it is not so much to be a slave of a man, but, well, there are accidents at home behind the walls, you know. Of course, it exists always. But it is also a question for women to be paid in the same way as men are paid. Because with the in the enterprises and in the production world, commercial world, women are always not considered as men are, and they are not paid as men are. And so, well, in France, the battle goes on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. And what I want to add for Puccini, well, one must be accustomed to the music of the 19th century. Puccini's opera is considered an experimental one because all the sounds you heard behind the voice of Maria Callas, and that's why I presented it. One hears the orchestra the best. All these sounds were new. And when one listens, well, one hears the gongs, and one hears, of course, much percussions, but one also hears quite modern sounds which are not harmonic. And that is new in Puccini, and what was why he is considered, this opera is considered experimental. But one must like it. The sound.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
No, but one of the things that is that's really inspiring, Sigil, is the fact that you do like it, and it is so much from your liking that we have enjoyed it too.
I'm not sure that I like the voices, but intellectually, you can speak about it. You can comment on it.
No, it's a marvelous thing because do we have any more questions?
Well, it's not really a question. Good evening, Sigil, and thank you very much.
Shubhati, can we see you, if we may?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Am I visible? Yes. Good evening. I was wondering if, there are, I'm not really familiar with this, but I know that there have been a few Chinese composers who have rewritten alternative endings for this. And I vaguely remember one, Hao Wei or somebody, I think, who had a kind of...
Shubha, excuse me, could you repeat, please? I didn't understand.
I was saying that there are certain Chinese composers who have also rewritten alternative endings for this story. I mean, I believe. So, do you have any such? Could you tell us anything about this?
Yes. In China, it has taken over. It has put on stage in China also, and it is a Puccini opera. They took over on stage in China. Yeah.
And were there other composers in China also who altered the ending?
Well, I don't know that. I didn't read about that in this direction. No, I didn't read it, but I'm not sure, of course, because I didn't look to the Chinese reception. I only know that they took over Puccini. But it may be that they changed. I can't say tell you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, excuse
Yeah,
me.
we enjoyed it. Yes, thank you so much.
Do we have any more questions or comments? No, I suppose. Okay, we don't have too much time either. So we'll just end by answering Shubhadi's question. Actually, there is a new ending, I think, which was written in 2008. I understand that it could not, the opera could not be performed in China because of the less than flattering presentation of the Chinese, the bloodthirsty Chinese princess, you see. And no, a couple of things, because it's just amazing the way elements travel, right? And when in Nizami's Haft Pekar, this particular story is it's a Russian princess, as you know, and Nizami himself was from Central Asia.
Yeah.
And in the framed story of Behram Gur, which is the main story of Haft Pekar, Behram Gur is attacked by the Emperor of China, because the Emperor of China thinks that Behram Gur is, like a playboy. He can't look after, because he has 7 houses for each day of the week and 1 wife for each day of the week. That is Haft Pekar.
In Nizami.
Yes, that's in Nizami. That's in Nizami. So all of this, I mean, it's amazing because, I mean, the word itself, Turan Dokht, Dokhtar is woman. So a woman of Turan as distinct from Iran. So it just shows the way in which ideas travel,
Absolutely.
And that is the most wonderful thing, that the most, the most productive thing that we can kind of really experience. Thank you so much, Sigil. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your commentary, and Chandra for your question, and Shubha for your comment. It is true. And that was what I was so happy about it when I wrote the paper, because one really sees how reception works.
Yes.
And how long it can work also. And why? Because Turandot gives so many possibilities to change. To change the setting, to change the personality, to change the media. And that was so interesting indeed. And if one goes to the source, indeed, I know it comes from there, about your center, where you come from. But it is here, it was not known when it came over here. And today even, I often read that they refer to the 1001 Nights, to say that is a story of the 1001 Nights, but that is not true.
No, it's days, yes.
So in Europe, it is a little bit not exactly realized, the different ways and the different forms are not really realized. They put
it won't be that's inevitable in reception, right? Yes. You will take it as you want. So
Sridhar, after such a wonderful presentation, you deserve a glass of wine.
These are the things that we are missing actually virtually. Everything else is happening.
Hello, Walter, how are you? Give her a glass of wine. She
on our
wonderful program. Okay? Bye.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you.
We'll do it in IIC when my friends join me.
Okay. I think, yes.
Okay.
Well, thank you to the audience also, even though the audience was very quiet. I think the audience is a little overwhelmed by the, by the power of.
After all the day, and I understand completely.
Yes.
Ravi Bhushanji, if you have anything more to say, we'll just hand over to you. And we must thank you also very much for
Yes.
making it so smooth for us.
Actually, we are used to this long hours, but Bhushan, Baravi Bhushan, this is your first entry to our arena, and I'm glad that you are bearing it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Ipsita, for conducting the session in such a nice way and with all your critical commentary on the paper. I enjoyed the paper thoroughly, though I have nothing to ask, but I enjoyed it thoroughly, including the music. So thank you so much. So I have no announcements to make. We meet tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Thank you, sir. Okay, good night.
About let me add, Bhushan.
To the CLI committee, to the students who have helped me to send all the music and the.
Yes, they are very.
Thank you very much.
I tell you, they are wonderful. They are very good, working day and night. Our team.
Yes.
So while you are saying all this CLI conference, can you take a screenshot of Professor Bogumil along with Mr. North, please? Is it possible?
I think Bhushan can take. Bhushan, can you take it? It's
So
short.
one thing these children will be able.
Pardon, sir. Can you please repeat? I had a call from.
Okay, we'll try this. ये कल कर लेंगे. अब छोड़िए. We'll try this tomorrow if we can manage a photograph.
Tomorrow, I would like to add that tomorrow at 9 a.m. there are going to be 2 foreign presentations.
Yeah.
One is, of course, from Bangladesh, our friend Mashroor. The second is from Pakistan, and the name of the girl is, she is coming first time, but we tried hard to find her, and ultimately she is there, Simiro. So she is very happy, and both unfortunately it is very early at 9 a.m. I hope.
It is early for me.
It will be 5 o'clock in Germany, I think.
Yes.
It will be 4 o'clock in Germany.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we will see.
Yeah, we'll see how it works.
Thank
you. Neeraj Saab, namaste. I haven't seen you, so.
Namaste, madam.
Namaste. I was expecting to see you earlier, but I didn't.
Yeah, I was busy in my classes. That's why.
Okay.
So, how are you?
I'm fine, sir. Thank you so much. Classes आपके चल रहे हैं?
Yes, ma'am. Offline mode.
Offline. Arey.
So Walter, my husband, Chandra, asked you how many glasses we should drink of Bordeaux, evidently.
We must have his for him too.